Welcome to part 2 of our episode with Zolal Habibi. Today, we're going to hear from Zolal about the values and the why, not only for her and her own story, but for the NCRI. We're going to hear her lay out specifically what the NCRI would like to see from the US and the powers that be around the world to allow the people to overthrow the regime and take power to create a democratic, free, safe Iran. There is a 10-point plan that has been laid out by NCRI's leader and president, Maryam Rajavi, that 4,000 countries, organizations, UN participants around the world have already said, yes, we are on board. We agree with this. We need to get more power behind this so we can actually help the people in Iran do what's best for the people and to rid themselves of this suffocating regime and to rid themselves of the colonization and greed of other countries around the world, including and especially right now, the US. And this is so important. It's so important to get the facts from the people. So here's part 2. Listen, share. Thank you so much for being with us. And thank you so much for supporting this important conversation. Share it far and wide. And we'll see you again next week. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming next week. But I really wanted to make sure that all of our energy was focused on these important conversations with Zolal Habibi. Thank you so much for being with us. I want to go back to the values piece. Explain to me, because you and I, when we first met, you talked about the fact that what sets you all apart is that you actually build policy off of these values that are steadfast. They're unchanging. They're everyone knows what they are, and they don't shift and change with changing dynamics or political environments. They're always there. What are those values, and who came up with them?
Well, I think those values are some of the most core values that we human beings have in general. And I think that is like the guiding light for us. The reality is that the founders of this organization based the fundamentals of this movement on core values, and from the onset, they made clear like what they stand for and what they stand against. They studied like practically all the different ideologies out there, and were able to pull out like what are those cores, what are those main messaging, and like what is it that we stand for as a progressive movement. So they didn't try to like say, okay, that one fits us best and we're going to take that. No, they built that from scratch. And so one of the main things that they did emphasize on was the fact that they are opposed to any form of discrimination, any form of exploitation. And that is like the core value, like any form of exploitation, be it by class, be it by race, be it by gender, be it by anything that we create or put in place to differentiate between peoples, because all human beings are born equal. So all of that creates those divisions and puts people in different compartments, those are all forms of exploitation that has been created by one side to dominate over the other, right? So having that understanding and fighting against that exploitation. And that is why the minute people realize that, look, within our own ranks, we still have, patriarchal thoughts or like ideals, that is what they're like, well, that's a form of exploitation. We're going to stand against that. So from the beginning, that has been like one of the key issues that this movement has concentrated on and been, and they've built everything based on that. So it's always been being the voice of the oppressed. being the
Wow.
voice of those who are, you know, being degraded to whatever level, or they are not receiving the proper, you know, possibilities and, you know, everything that they should. And so that has been always a cornerstone. And that's why, like, we always said, you know, no matter from what class in society you come from, at the end of the day, we belong to the lowest class, to try to be able to lift them up and to be able to give them, you know, wings and to allow them to grow. So that has been like something that's been very important. Like, that is like the ideal that this movement works toward. Like, if you want to say,
Mm.
like, what is its idealistic slogan,
Mm-hmm.
it is, um, forward on, or like onward toward um, a society that everyone is equal in, and
Mm-hmm.
every human being is respected. That is like the final goal
Yeah.
that we have, and it's not even limited to Iran or the freedom of Iran. This is something that's going to continue for generations and generations until we reach that day that all forms of exploitation are eliminated in society. So that is like the ideal that we've been, you know, working on. So towards, in this process, I mean, there are some of the values that we stand for is, first of all, because they did study our founding fathers, they did study like all the different revolutions, all the different ideologies, history, and everything. So they had an understanding, all encompassing understanding of, you know, what uh, has been the experience of human history, or, you know,
Yeah.
society. And so with that in mind, they set those core values. Like, one of them is, you know, sacrifice and
Mm.
honesty.
Mm.
So in every scenario, every issue that you deal with, how can I fix it? By making a sacrifice. How can I fix it with my honesty? And to,
Mm.
you know, to create that unity in society, you need those two. You need to be
Yeah.
able to give and not want anything in return. It's not a negotiation. It's not, you know, to
Not a
give
transaction.
wholeheart yeah, give wholeheartedly, and also
Mm-hmm.
to be honest with yourself and with everyone else, because that
Mm.
unity comes from that honesty. So that has those have been core values. Um,
Wow.
and so there, I mean, through this movement, there are so many human values that have been revived
Mm.
or have been set straight, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But so in every aspect and every angle that you look at it, and you see, you know, for each one, when the beauty of it is each one is has its own symbol, like a person that you've seen them be that way, or, you know, people
Yeah.
who have, you know, among those who have been executed by the regime, even. But you
Mm.
see, you know, those symbols, and the fact that these you try to learn from each other's values and set each person as an example for a specific value, and then follow in their footsteps, so that then you realize like the abundance of values that you have, and the abundance of like valuable people that you're surrounded by, and to cherish every single one of them and
Yeah.
honor them for who they are, the path that they have chosen, for the sacrifices that they have made, because each person, each individual has their personal story, and each one is very valuable. And to realize that, and that I think is one of the things that's like of great value. But I think that also what you said, um, I think the first person who said this about us was, at the time, he was the vice president of the European Parliament. And he said, "You are a movement that, instead of, you know, giving in or bowing out of like your principles or what you stand for, because it will be to your benefit, you actually stand and defend it and try to explain it, like, this is why we did this and this is why we stand for it. And because you're willing to really stand for it, you're able to have that power to change the other person's views, or to be able to, you know, truly clarify that, look, these are what we stand for. This is where we stand. This is what we, our views are. Like, we have taken, due to the policy of appeasement, the Iranian resistance was actually labeled as a terrorist, as a goodwill gesture to Khatami back in 1997. Like back at a time that like Al Qaeda wasn't even on the terrorist list, but it was just more
Wow.
the same way that Mandela was on the terrorist list at that time. So,
Yeah.
But this movement didn't just accept that, because everyone said, look, it's impossible to be removed from the terrorist list. No one has ever done it before. Even Nelson Mandela was only removed from the terrorist list like years after they had, they had able to overcome apartheid, and it was only the first time that they had invited him to come and speak at the U.S. Congress that they realized that, oh, we need to remove him from the terrorist list to allow him to come and speak, and that is when it happened. So this is years after he was, they had been able to overcome apartheid government and everything. So everyone told us like it's impossible. But Mrs. Raja was like, no, we're going to stand by our principles. We haven't done anything wrong, and we need to set that wrong right. Not we have never done any. We hold our head up high for everything that we've done, and we're willing to take responsibility, full responsibility for anything that we've done. But we haven't done anything that could be labeled as terrorism. And so, through 15 years and I think over 20 different courts, court systems, both in the U.S. and Europe and UK, everywhere, they, all without exception, every single court, this issue was taken to, voted in favor of the movement and said there's nothing in their record that can be categorized as terrorism.
Wow.
And so at the end of the day, and I mean, in the US, they really got stuck on this because they were like, how are we going to do, how are we going to revoke this whole process? So actually, Hillary Clinton was the one who actually did it finally. But the reality is that, I mean, it was a, what was interesting is we were able to bring lawmakers to come and be the ones who actually filed against the court rulings. Like, that is how much they were able to believe in us, because they were like, no, you know what? We are, like, for instance, in the UK, it was, lords and MPs who were like, we have sworn to the Queen at the time, and but our government has done something wrong. It needs to set a wrong right. And so that's, those was filed by 35 lawmakers asking the government to, change your status. Or like in the US, it was like a the clause that they used in based on the US Constitution to be able to finally remove the name of the resistance from the terrorist list. It's something that hadn't been used in 200 years, and it was done. And so that, everyone's like, you are setting a new precedent, even in US history, even in our own, in fact, empowering our judiciary, empowering the fact that, there's a, separation of, powers in the US. And in fact, you are adding to this democracy by doing that, by clarifying that, you have that power in the judiciary to make that decision independently or whatnot. So I think that throughout, the history of this movement, there's so many ups and downs, and there's so many obstacles that we have overcome, that a lot of lessons can be learned from them.
Yeah.
And each step of the way, we have realized how important it is to stand steadfast by your values, even if it's not popular. Like, I remember back in 1996 when Khatami was chosen by the regime as president. For us, it was clear that this was just a show for the West, trying to say like, oh, we have a reformist or we have a moderate too, and maybe, if you guys start negotiating with him, and then you might see some kind of change in Iran. And they were just trying to buy time, and it was
Yeah.
clear to us. And what was very interesting for me back then, I was still in high school, but I was
Mm.
15, and I remember this was done in end of May. This, Khatami was brought out of the ballot box end of May, and then the next day, the National Council of Resistance, everyone gave a statement: a viper never gives birth to a dove, and there is going to be no reform under Khatami. And that was not very popular at that time. Everyone was like, "Oh, just give him a chance. You never know. It's Khomeini has died, and it's Khamenei now, and he's a moderate, so maybe things are changing." And uh, you guys just are holding a grudge or whatever. And we're like, "No, that is in principle, and viper never gives birth to a dove. You can't. I mean, that is just it's nature. It's not going to." And no one
Yeah.
believed us back then. And it took them decades, unfortunately, to realize that this regime is not reformable. And right
Yes.
now, I mean, for 20 something years, Mrs. Rajavi has been saying, look, warning the world that the solution is neither war nor appeasement. It's support the Iranian people and their resistance to bring about change. She always stated that, look, the policy of appeasement will eventually lead to a war.
Mm.
We need to take that, understand that, because I mean, that experience actually exists from World War II, right?
Yeah.
The West appeased Hitler to the extent that it was already too late, and so the war broke out.
Yeah.
So that experience actually existed. So you need to learn from those experiences and understand the logic behind them, and because this is all very logical, and it's a science, in itself.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you understand those rules and that logic behind it, then you can make those clear, distinct statements. And what is very interesting for me is actually a few days ago I ran into a video. It's from back in 1996, and it was a speech by Mrs. Rajavi, and someone was sharing it for International Women's Day, and I was like, if you just listen to the audio without the video, you think that she's talking about today. And I think that
Mm.
those type of
Wow.
evergreen statements that come out from this movement, like we have videos like from our, some of the top people in this movement who have unfortunately throughout the years been killed by the regime or back in the early 80s. And when you listen to it, you're like, that's exactly what happened. It was
Mm.
right. Statements were true. Or
Yeah.
like, for instance, one of the head of the National Council of Resistance, Mr. Rajavi, in his speeches from back in 1979, they
Mm.
still are true today. And it's like, oh my God, how did you foresee this future back then? It's not that he foresaw the future, he just understood the science of it and the logic of it. And so he was like, look, this is what's going to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that 4 days after being released from prison in 1979, and it was like a week before Khomeini took over, he said, long live the Democratic Republic. No, sorry, long live the Democratic Revolution, everyone. And that created like a whole, whole bunch of, noise, because the regime was presenting it as an Islamic revolution. And here is one of the key people who has created this revolution and was in prison till the last day, was the last set of political prisoners released from prison. And everyone knows that they are the ones who had created this revolution. And he's like, no, 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 it's a democratic revolution. We did not, even though we are Muslims, we did not revolt for Islam. We revolted for freedom. And freedom is the
Mm.
um, one thing that we should, you know, that is the litmus test here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guaranteeing everyone's freedoms, and that is what's being put under, is being stomped on right now by the regime.
Yeah.
And he said that from day one, and it took a lot of people for 4 decades to understand it. So I
Yeah.
think that, a lot of those statements, they really, sometimes you just get chills watching it and you're like, oh my
Mhm.
God, they said this like 47 years ago, and today the world is starting to realize it.
Yeah.
So sometimes we feel like I wish more people would listen, but
Yes.
um, yeah, but it's very interesting to see it in the process and to learn from it and to be able to have that kind of guidance to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. Not for that information, for how you really live out your values. They're not just words, but you consciously, continuously, over the last 50 years have lived out these values. The history of like, boy, if we could just pay attention and learn, because I think what is becoming so clear now in these days that we are watching this, and really for me from the US, watching it in frustration, um, because of the failures of our own government. And quite honestly, the impure reasons, in my opinion, that our government has stepped in. You're asked, you need regime change. It isn't okay for just the next guy in line to step in. This regime needs to be removed. That is your expectation. That is your hope. What?
But we
Go
believe
ahead.
that people have to do that because
Okay, that was my
democracy
next
can't
question.
be democracy can't be installed. It has
Okay.
to come from the people of Iran.
Okay.
And the reality is that we have this experience too. I mean, just look over the last 100 years in Iran. Um, Reza Khan, he was installed by the British in a coup d'etat. He was a military general and then he was made king. And then once he wasn't serving the interest of the British anymore, they took him out and they installed his son.
Mhm.
And um, at the beginning, his son didn't have the strength that his father did. So the people of Iran, they were still pushing forward the 1906 constitutional revolution and everything. So they were able to elect a prime minister that actually represented the people of Iran. So the only democratic government that Iran has had in the last 100 years was Dr. Mossadegh, and that was for 2 years only.
Wow.
And the U.S. said that, well, he's nationalizing Iran's oil, and it's not to their benefit. So what did they do? They carried out a coup d'état against Dr. Mossadegh and reinstated the Shah. So
Wow.
again, the Shah was brought in by the Americans. And then in 1979, um, actually in end of 1978, like a few months before the revolution, the world
Mhm.
started to realize that this regime, the Shah, is not going to be able to keep himself in power, especially
Yeah.
after the bloody Friday where he killed thousands of people on the streets in Iran. And so they brought in Khomeini, who was in exile in Iraq, to Paris, and they met with him and they had discussions in Guadeloupe, and they decided it was the Cold War era. They said, well, these progressive movements who have actually created this revolution, we don't know what direction they're going to be going into. And we don't know where they lie in regards to USSR. So it's better for us if we have this fundamentalist mullah in power rather than allow the people of Iran to have those progressive movements create the new government that they want to.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, you know, it was a popular revolution that overthrew the Shah, but the revolution was hijacked by Khomeini. And
Wow.
the people of Iran have been paying the price for it ever since.
Yeah.
So this time around, people of Iran are like, look, you know what? Thank you, but no thanks. We want to do this ourselves. We want
Okay.
to be able to create that change ourselves because that is the only way we can guarantee some kind of democracy in Iran.
Yeah.
We are not stuck in between choosing between the current regime and the previous regime, which were both dictatorships. We
Mhm.
want to move forward in the 21st century, and we want a secular democratic republic.
Mm.
And that is like what is key. And it is what guarantees that we can create that. I think the 10-point plan presented by Mr. Rajavi gives a guideline for it because in it, even though it's only 10 points, but it outlines to, the T, like things that need to be done and things that we need to,
Yeah.
prevent. Like the fact that it calls for, the ballot box is the only criterion. Uh, Freedom of speech, freedom of, press, freedom of um, association, remove the free internet access, which people in Iran don't have, but
Yeah.
also that all of these entities, these suppressive forces, in every way of it, they all need to be, you know,
Rooted out.
yeah, they need to be removed and completely. So
Yeah.
it's not just rebranding, because that's what happened from the Shah to Khomeini. So it was
Yeah.
Savak. The Savak became Vevak. Same structure, same people, even to a great extent. Or like for instance, the Eternal Guards became the IRGC. For now, the
Mm.
IRGC to become Eternal Guards again. No, that's not how it's going to work. So
Yeah.
they all need to be removed, and the fact that it calls for gender equality, um,
Yeah.
the rights of ethnicities, separation of religion and states, a non-nuclear Iran which is at peace with its neighbors and neighboring countries, a Iran that you know actually even about Iran's environment, because right now it's completely destroyed.
Yeah.
And so like it had a free market economy, independent judiciary. I mean, all of these, they really outline or provide that guideline for you to be able to make sure that that interim government is able to do what it does. And as Ms. Rajab has reiterated even in the past week, um, after the death of Khamenei, she has stated that you look, what is clear, first of all, this is what we outlined. The provisional government is for 6 months.
Mm.
Then the people of Iran, through open elections, so like public elections, so every single person gets to vote and be effective in that regard.
Yeah.
They will vote for so after like 6 months, they will vote for a national legislative and constituent assembly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
from that moment on, they don't have any responsibilities in regards to the interim government. Their work is done. This new national legislative and constituent assembly takes responsibility. They are responsible to draft the new constitution and determine the new republican system of the country, and
Mm.
legislate for the administration of the current affairs until the formation of the first national assembly under the new constitution, and designated government which will, oversee the whole process within that time. And then there will be, after the new constitution is put to vote by the people of Iran and it's final, ratified, then we
Yeah.
will have, free elections and the new system will be up and working. So she has clarified there, and in
Yeah.
her message, she actually says, I emphasize once again that the NCRI and the provisional government are not seeking power, but rather the transfer of power to the sovereignty of the Iranian people. And I think that's really important.
Yes. How do we get the world to listen to that and pay attention to that? Because this is not what we're hearing about on the news. And so how do we get the attention of the people, and what needs to happen from the outside powers to make this happen? One, they got to listen and put their own interest aside, because I feel like other, the US and a lot of other countries, their own selfish interest impact this as well, and which is a problem.
It
It's not a
does.
help. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't matter if the US goes in and blows things up, and that's doesn't put these forces into play. Not to mention the oil. There's so many things. The oil, the money, there's so many things that factor this in. In your ideal scenario, what would need to take place from these outside entities for this to go into play? Because you talked about there, you've got movements, you've got people on the ground that want to put this into play, but it
I
doesn't
think that
happen. It doesn't happen if these other
I think that
regimes are in the way.
I think that right now, at the point that we are today, I think that the phase of appeasement has come to an end, which is good. Hopefully, the war will end too very soon, because it's not to the benefit of anyone.
Yeah.
I think what needs to happen at this point is for the international community to recognize the provisional government that has been announced by the NCRI, but also to recognize the right of the Iranian people to resist and to fight against this regime, to be able to overthrow the regime in its entirety. That is something that I think uh, the massacre that has been carried out in January of this year, that was the hay that broke the camel's back for the people
Yeah.
of Iran. They
Yeah.
realized that, look, we have to continue this until the overthrow of the regime. Otherwise, they're going to buy time, and then we have to come again to the streets, and there's going to be a more brutal massacre like this one. And again, the regime is going to, suppress, and then this cycle is a never-ending cycle. We need to put an
Yeah.
end to that cycle by taking our destination into our own hands and overthrowing this regime in its entirety. The only thing that the Iranian people are asking for in the Iranian resistance, they have clarified like 1,000 times. We don't
Mm.
want your money. We don't want your troops on the ground. None of it. Just allow us to be able to fight. Stop preventing us from doing it with the policy of appeasement or with these limitations that you're putting on the people of Iran. So I think that is what's key, and I think that there are governments who are key lawmakers who are stepping in this direction. Right now, over 4,000 lawmakers around the world do support the 10-point plan of Mrs. Rajavi, and also of
Mm.
130 former heads of state, over 100 Nobel laureates have supported. So many people from different parts of the spectrum our society have supported this 10-point plan. But it's
Yeah.
time to speak about it more, bring the attention of everyone to it. I think it's really important to emphasize that, look, the people of Iran, they're not asking for troops on the ground. If you really want to help the people of Iran, I think there are different ways that you could do it. First of all, you could, first of all, support the resistance, allow them to take matters into their own hands.
Yeah.
The other is you could have, help the people of Iran against the censorship that the regime creates in these times, like provide them internet. The world could have done that. They could do that
Yeah.
even right now. It's
Yeah.
not being done, and so that allows the regime to open hands in its crimes. You can hold the regime accountable for its crimes against humanity, for its
Yeah.
war crimes. Um, Impunity is what emboldens dictators, and the
Mm.
international community has allowed that for the Iranian regime for decades. So I think that these are very key elements, that
Yeah.
these are very practical steps that the international community can take to shut down Iran's embassies, because they are, how the regime is carrying out its terrorist activities and everything. So, hold that. Those are very key
Yeah.
steps that can really help the people of Iran in their fight, and allowing them to, actually carry out that fight themselves.
Wow. Thank you so much for that. That is so helpful and so informative. And I think it's the information we all need to hear and know, so we know how to voice to our own governments that are engaged in this. No, you need to do this. This is, calling our senators, calling our representatives and saying no. Now, we have our own issues right now because our president isn't even asking Congress, like he's violating our constitution all over the place. So we've got our own mess here happening. And now he's engaged in your issues and mess, not in the interest of your people, but and that's been true for generations, unfortunately, for so many of these Western countries that colonize and go in and think they have all the answers, instead of trusting you, the people who know your history, who are invested. So thank you so much for breaking that down for us. That's so helpful. I talk a lot about layers on here. My network's called the Embracing Layers Network. There's so many layers to your story. In your own family, there's so many layers to the story of the Iranian people and being able to look at all those layers, look at what's happened. Let's learn from this and let's be allowed the fact. I mean, I did not know until I talked to you today that your organization has a 10-point plan that's been set forward that lays this all out. That there's, thousands of people around the world that are coming saying, yes, this is how we do this. So thank you so much for sharing that. Is there a place that 10-point plan can be found online so people have access to it?
Yes, I could. I will share with you like the links and everything, so you could share it in
Right.
the notes.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Because I think these are the things we need to know. So we know as individuals, because I think sometimes as individuals in these countries where our governments are doing things that are like, there's no way that's for the good of the actual people in this country. This is not about that. How do we use our voices and lift our voices to support the actual people on the ground in the country? And this gives us some great resources to do that. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for sharing the history, the layers of the Iranian history, the stories. I'm 56 years old, so I remember I was 10 years old when the in the the hostage situation and the overthrow of the Shah and all these things happened, and then it looked like an opportunity, and then it just became more of the same, which is so tragic. And it's like, okay, it's time to break that. We've seen how this goes. And I think it's important for all of us to be, it sounds simple, but like let the people be who they are. Let support the people. No one knows their traditions, their rights, their freedoms, their desires, their hopes more than them. Support them and do things to support them in building the freedom that we all want. Let's help them build that too. So I thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of this information, sharing all the layers to this story. Um, as we wind this down, and I've got a few more kind of fun, lighthearted questions as before we end it. But what is it, if you could tell people what you wish they understood? Because I think another thing that's come up for me is how your faith informs. Because I think the West has not just the West, but Islam religion is all over the world. But I do think there's a misunderstanding of what its principles are and how it informs these movements versus how it's weaponized, just like Christianity is weaponized. I mean, there's the true form of it, and then there's actually the weaponized form. I think we see that a lot with Islam too. What do you wish people knew about that you think is misunderstood?
I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding there. But I think that it's really important to understand that all of these religions, they actually have the same core and the same beliefs, and just at different times. But um, in fact, Islam is supposed to be the religion of peace, and
Ah,
actually, it's the first religion that, because I mean, things progress with time. I mean, each one are very valuable, and they've just moved forward each time with the times, with the situation that they, at the time that they were founded.
yeah.
But in Islamic, for instance, it's actually, I think, the first religion that is against all forms of exploitation. So that is like one of its
Wow.
keys. Like in Islam at that time, it was against slavery back
Wow.
1,500 years ago. So they took that step, and against racism too. Like, for instance, the Prophet had the person who says the azan, the call to prayer, to be someone who was, you know, a Black African. And at a time that they were supposed to be enslaved, and he was like, no, he's a human being just like you are. Who
Mm,
thinks, why are you being treated different? Why should he be treated any differently? Or the
yeah.
fact that at a time that, unfortunately, back then, they would bury girls alive because they would, they didn't want daughters or whatnot. He only had one daughter, and he was like, she is the apple of my eye, and
Mm,
that is the only way that I will treat her. And you need to treat your daughters the same way. And everyone at the time was like, you know, you need to like have another child for it to be a son or whatever. And he was like, no, that's
mm,
not. All human beings are created equal and whatnot. So I mean, even the reality is that people don't really understand like the cores, and I think that it is a very revolutionary religion if you go into like the basics of it and like the understanding of it. But of course, I mean, things change over time. I mean, you shouldn't be. I think a lot of things are taken out of context. In
Yeah.
Islam, it says there's this one verse in the Quran. It says there's no force in religion. If you take that
Mm,
as like that principle, then nothing should be by force.
yeah.
So then all of this that we are seeing, that is not the true Islam that is being presented. And I think that that's really important to understand at that time. Um, and to understand that, unfortunately, all religions have been misused at one point in time. And this is what we're seeing right now. And there are those who do have fundamentalist or maybe fundamentals is not a good term. It could be positive too, but like a backward minded set
Yeah.
of understanding of each religion. And this is
Yeah.
true in all of them, and it's really important to differentiate between them and understand that all of these religions actually have the same message and
Yeah.
work toward the same values and whatnot. So um,
Yeah.
and personally, I think that religion should be a personal matter to people. So it should be a choice, personal choice for people. It shouldn't have any role in how it dictates to the society or how people should live their lives. It should be a personal choice and it shouldn't have any place in the government.
Yeah. Yeah, because they take the parts that work for them and weaponize them, and they leave out the actual truth and core of it. We've seen it happen time and time again. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so important that we draw the line between what's actually true versus what's being weaponized and what we tend to hear about. And we get very, and the sad thing about the weaponized piece is it's led to just tragedies throughout the world because people don't actually understand the truth of it, what's happening, and they make a judgment based on erroneous information and make tragic decisions based off of that. So I think it's so important. Thank you so much for breaking that down so well. As we wrap up today on a little more of a lighthearted note, tell me 5 activities that nourish you.
I think that was probably like the hardest question that you asked. uh, so, mm, hmm. uh, one is, you know, giving
Mhm,
giving to others,
mhm,
showing that and like listening to people,
mhm,
um, having time to think
mm,
and to think in depth about things that you're seeing, um, pointing out the values or what you learn from others and
mm, mm.
cherishing that and honoring that, and showing that respect.
Yeah.
um, that's four, right? You still need
Mhm,
another one. um, what else? And taking joy in the little things,
mm. Yeah.
and enjoying that. And that's five. There you
Okay. Yes. Thank you so much. I think that taking joy in the little things, that goes back to that hope that you hold. I mean, I think that really gives you the resource you need to keep doing this vitally important work that you're doing. All right. 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Optimistic,
Mhm,
um, full of energy,
mhm.
um, and keeping up that hope,
Yeah.
and resist,
Mhm.
and to um, strive beyond what we have,
Yeah.
and I guess, to also be able to mobilize. There you go.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Zolal, thank you so much for your time today. You are doing important work right now. In fact, we had to split this recording into two so you could tend to an important meeting for all that's going on in the world right now, with your country and with your fight for its freedom. Thank you for sharing this information. I've learned so much. I'm going to share this as far and wide as possible. All of Zolal's resources are going to be linked in our show notes. But do you want to share, one, a final thought with everyone, and two, the best way to learn about NCRI's work?
Well, I guess the call to action would be, as you said, raise awareness and learn more, but also contact your lawmakers, contact your local media, share the message of the Iranian people. Use your social media platforms. Share the message. There is a third option on Iran. It's neither war nor appeasement. It's supporting the people of Iran and their organized resistance. And the people of Iran, there's also they have a third option in the path they choose. They're not stuck between this current mullahs or the previous Shah's dictatorship. They want to move forward to a secular democratic republic. And share the 10-point plan, share the views of the NCRI, and take part in the different events and activities that they have in support of this movement in different countries. In the US, you could reach out to oiac.org. It's the Organization of Iranian-American Communities. They have chapters in over 40 states, so you should probably be covered there. But yeah, and to learn more about the NCRI, you could visit ncr-iran.org, or you could also visit mariamrajaviforchange.com to learn more about her and what she stands for and her views.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Zolal. We will be supporting you. We will be getting the word out. We will be sharing this information. I'm so thankful. I'm so honored that I got to share you on my platform. And we will continue to spread the word. Stay safe, keep that hope up, and continue to stay in contact on how we can support you. Listeners, this is maybe some of the most important information on a global level that I've ever shared on this platform. Be curious, get into these resources, learn. This is an opportunity to remove all past judgments or stereotypes or what you thought you knew, and take this information and this conversation and learn and move forward with this information, and think about ways that you can actively support it right where you are. We can't all do everything, but we can all do something. And remember that you are valuable and you are worthy and you get to choose. And we want that for everyone. We want everyone to have that privilege and that right. So thank you, Zolal. Again, take good care. And thank you so much, listeners, for being with us here on the F.E.E.L Podcast. We'll see you next time. Hello, and thank you so much for being with us today on this episode of the F.E.E.L Podcast. If you would like more information on how you can apply these talking points that I share with our guests in each episode to your own life, really utilize this F.E.E.L framework, go to embracinglayers.com, fill out our contact form, and let's set up a free 30-minute consultation to talk about how you can start living your most authentic, organic, healthy, F.E.E.L-fueled life. Thanks again for being with us today. We'll be back to you soon with another episode here on the F.E.E.L Podcast.